So, I think I'll begin. This is going to be, thank you very much for coming. We're going to talk a little bit about how people talk with one another, and that's going to be the focus of it. But let me introduce myself just a tiny bit before we get started. My name is Stephen Fahrenholtz, and I always tell everybody to remember it as Lou Holtz standing on the 50-yard line of Notre Dame. Get it? Fahrenheit? Holding a thermometer, excuse me, I forgot that central point. Holding a thermometer, standing the 50-yard line of Notre Dame. And the reason I do that is because many, many years ago, I was sent to Dale Carnegie and it cost $10,000. The only thing I got out of it was that. And 30 years later, I'm trying to still get my money back. So that's the part here. So a little bit, one of the things I guess the second thing I did learn from Dale Carnegie is to say like why I'm talking today and maybe why you might want to listen to me, okay? So the first thing you might want to listen to me is I founded something called the I Squad, and if you're kind of in the innovation world, has anybody heard of IDEO or those places? Large-scale innovation firms. I ran an innovation lab for General Mills, or I founded the innovation lab for General Mills, and we've created a bunch of stuff. So what I'm going to talk about today is how you prepare yourself to get a team to jump in the unknown on a routine daily basis. Okay, it's a high-stress environment, and I'm going to talk about why it's high stress. So this can be applied to anybody that you have a small working team together that has to accomplish a goal under time stress. So does anybody have a small working team? Raise your hand. Does anybody ever feel stress? Does anybody ever have conflicts with people that they're working with? Oh, you didn't need to raise your hand there. Okay. But it is being taped and I'll pass that on to them. So now, before you completely dismiss me as not having any, I don't have any computer chops, but I do have technical chops. Before I took a right-hand turn and became very involved in innovation and went over the dark side of almost marketing, I was a research fellow. So if you're familiar with technical organizations, there's two tracks. There's a technical side and this. And before I got involved in innovation, I got to the head of the technology track. And to give myself more tops, I am a PhD statistician. So do you want to talk numbers? I can. But we're going to talk about something that's so far away from numbers that I just want to do that so you didn't think I didn't know numbers. So I do know numbers. I don't know computers so well. So we started out here just a tiny bit, and you actually answered very affirmatively, right? You have to work with other people in a small team. You sometimes have to work under stress, and you sometimes get into conflict. This happened to me fairly routinely in the I Squad, which was, we would get mandates like, let me give you one of the more peculiar mandates. We were asked to figure out General Mills' oil strategy for the next 20 years. I knew nothing about oil, and nothing about how oil is bought, and I'm supposed to figure this out? Okay, fine. And so we would get this, and it's like, whoa, we'll go and figure this out. But you need a little bit of structure if you're going to go explore and climb Mount Everest, right? You need these ropes and belays between people, and I'm going to talk about what these ropes and belays look like. Now, one last one. This is actually a project of passion for me. The last thing is, after I have left General Mills about 2 years ago and struck out on my own to do my own thing. And the reason I'm so passionate about what I'm doing right now is I'm a life coach for people that want to do innovation inside companies. Let me say that again. I'm a life coach for people that want to do innovation inside companies. So I help you figure out how to manage the companies, how to run a team that has to do the new inside a company. So that's my specialty, helping people thrive inside companies while still doing the new. Now, I think this whole thing about belays and stuff, I think we've got a few misconceptions. And the first misconception is how many of us would like to listen, be more active listeners? How many of us would like to be better collaborators? How many of us would like to set up a trusting environment? Give me your action plan for those things. Right? Good motivations are completely insufficient, aren't they? I'm going to listen harder, listen more active listening. Well, okay, what am I going to do? So what I have discovered is that for all those good things, and if you don't have any of these good motivations, please leave, okay? But if you have these good motivations, what I have actually found after studying the psychology literature quite a bit is that if we change what we say, we automatically change what we do. And so the point of this whole thing is I'm going to give you like 6 words to say, 6 little short phrases, or I'm going to teach you how to create your own little phrases. And if you say these things repeatedly in the right mode, you will act differently. And probably the magical thing about it is everybody will react to you differently. So, language is the key for most things. Now, wow. The actual technique that this is based on is called signpost language. Let me repeat that again. The actual technique is called signpost language. And signpost language actually came from studying, guess what? Signs. Okay. So now, signpost language. There's this sign. What are you supposed to do with this sign? Audience participation.
Stop.
Why do you stop? So you don't get smooshed, right? Because the other people are not stopping. Oh, so you stop and you do it because you don't want to get smooshed. Wow. You're a good audience. Great. You see this sign. What do? You what?
Go 25 miles an hour because it's a school zone.
It's a school zone, and why do you go 25 miles an hour?
So you don't hit kids.
Why, and why don't you want to hit kids? Because kids are... Why, no, actually, why do you not want... Why are you especially about a school zone? What's special about a school zone? Because kids are what? Unpredictable. Right? So you go 25 miles an hour, or you slow down, because kids are unpredictable. Wow. We didn't get together to understand that, did we? Oh, let's go to another sign. Okay? What do you do here when you see this sign? You use caution. Why? Because hitting people would be kind of bad, right? Okay. Now, oh, this is a fun sign. I don't know. I don't know what you do with that sign. But I don't know if you crash on purpose or what, right?
Walk your bike across.
Well, I don't know. But you know, you have all these signs. Now the magic of signs is they have 2 things if you think about them really, really hard. These road signs have 2 things in common that are pretty magical. They have a universally expected behavior and a commonly understood rationale. Let me say that again. This is, by the way, this is a whole talk. This talk is so simple. I've given you 90% of it already. They have a universally expected behavior and a commonly accepted rationale. You stop at a stop sign because you don't want to get hit. You slow down in school zones because you don't want to, say this, you don't want to smush kids or kids are inattentive. So, this all breaks down like, remember when they had this sign? Oh, what, no, this sign? Orange chair, right at the airport? It is now orange. What am I supposed to do? Be scared. I don't know, right? This sign, what are you supposed to do here? You're supposed to drive what? 70. And why do we not drive 70? Because we really don't understand why it's 70. Why it's not 75, why it's not 80. This one, the first one failed because it didn't have a commonly understood action of what to do. The second one fails because it doesn't have an uncommon understanding of belief or rationale. So, here's what signpost language is all about. Signpost language is telling the people the conversation we're having so that can we make sure that we're having the same conversation. So I want you to give this brain tease right now. I want you to think of something that's happening in your environment that you would like to make better, that you think you've had miscommunication on. And I'm going to teach you how to have less miscommunication on whatever this thing is. And it varies from group to group. I'm giving you the 5 conversations that I like to have no miscommunication on, but it changes from group to group. So think about something in your past or in your small group that you've had miscommunication and are not working as well on as you would like to. So, signpost language is a 3-step process. You develop a phrase for the conversation that you're going to have, and this is the sign. It's a trigger phrase. I'm going to give you 5 trigger phrases that I commonly use. After you develop the trigger phrase, you tell everybody why you're having this conversation, what this trigger phrase means, and then you tell them how you're going to have the conversation. Then you actually teach them, tell them why we're having this conversation. So it should be tied to what you want to have happen, right? That's why I asked that question. And you develop a trigger phrase. What is a trigger phrase? A trigger phrase, I'm going to step in the first one. I'm going to give you my first conversation just to make this very explicit. There's a conversation that you need to have in most organizations called constructive conflict. Okay? Let me define what constructive conflict is. Constructive conflict is telling you something that you don't want to hear, yet we still remain a working relationship. So I'm going to tell you something that you don't want to hear, but yet we need to maintain. Okay. So my trigger phrase, whenever I had to have that conversation with somebody, and I'm going to come back to this conversation, was I would look you straight in the eye and I say, I need to step in the tension with you. I need to step in the tension with you. And actually, it's better even if you have a metaphor for why that is. I used to know an Olympic bow archer, and he would say, the way to become a best Olympic bow archer is to step in the tension of the bow. So I need to step in the tension with you. When I said I need to step in the tension with you, you knew that we had potential conflict. You were trained that you were going to listen to me till you understood what my potential conflict with you was. Repeat it back to me. Then we were going to work to come to a mutual solution. And if we couldn't come to a mutual solution, you were given another phrase. Have anybody ever gotten too much feedback from somebody? If you have gotten this can turn into an abusive conversation. So what do you say if somebody's giving you too much feedback? You know what you say? Look them straight in the eye and say, thank you for the feedback. And the appropriate response was, you could say nothing more. We would separate. So, wow, I'm going to tell you stories about how that changes the way we actually stepped into fairly tense situations very quickly. Now, before I go too much further, I want to contrast this with a typical conversation. Ben, I'm going to pick on Ben up here. I have a conflict with Ben, right? I'm really concerned that we're going to miss our deadline. I'm really concerned about it. Ben, how are you today? Ben's thinking, oh, you got some time to talk? Oh, maybe he likes me. Whoa, let's figure out what to. And so, the point is, I want you to think of this. This is the anti-body language talk. How many of you have been taught, though, if they cross their arms, they're not engaged. If they sit back, I'm not trying to read it. I'm going to say what I mean what I say. And that's how the conversation gets so fast. So let's keep going here. Now, before we go too much further, I'm going to give you a couple examples that this is actually exists in culture today. How many have had children or have seen children? Okay. Okay. So one of the first things you teach children is to say what? Please and thank you. They're very little. They don't know this. You teach them this conversation. Somebody does something for you, you say thank you. You need something from somebody else, you say please. And you start it 2 years old or maybe even younger. And eventually they get it, and it's a sign of good parenting that they've been taught please and thank you. Here's a little background for you. Please and thank you was not part of the English language until about the 1500s. These words did not exist. The reason for that is in about the 1500s we formed towns. And once we formed towns, we got specialization. So you might grind the corn, I might make shoes, and you might sell the vegetables. When we formed towns, we had specialization. So therefore, there was interdependence. Once we became interdependents, we needed the interdependence to work well. Therefore, the language invented to convey our interdependence. That's why you may know it's just good manners, but if you dig under it, please and thank you is the symbol for our society that we're interdependent and we need the help of others to succeed. And so that's why it was invented when we formed towns. It's a signal of interdependence. How many basketball fans I have out here? Anybody watch? Basketball. Dean Smith, North Carolina. Did I get that right? That North Carolina, not North Carolina State. North Carolina. Dean Smith, best basketball coach. He did two things. He believed, this is what I want you to think about. Dean Smith thought that the two things he wanted to base his basketball team on were collaboration and playing hard. He developed signpost language to convey the two things. Collaboration. Whenever, if you watch the films, and they were taught this from the day they started playing basketball for Dean Smith, when you scored a basket, you went down the court and you pointed at the person that gave you the pass. And if you didn't do that, you were benched. Does that make collaboration very obvious? Yes. Thank you, Ben, for sending me the pass. And if you watch the old films, you'll see them all going like this. I never knew why it was. Second thing he wanted to do is he wanted them to play hard. He wanted them to play pressing defense, press. They wanted to play until you were exhausted. So, let's say had a signal, signpost language, it was actually physical for them. Whenever you were playing for Dean Smith, you held your hand up like this when you were tired. No questions were asked, you were substituted, and you could substitute for yourself at any time. The complete empowerment of the workforce, the basketball team. Whenever you were tired, you can call your own substitute. Goodness sakes, if you ever got tired and weren't playing hard and you didn't call for a substitute, you were put on the bench. You were given a sign. I'm tired, I need a substitute so we can continue as a team to play hard. Okay, wow. That's so much more powerful than saying, we're gonna play pressing defense. Or it's more, pass the ball, pass the ball. No, he made it just very simple, signpost language, and the people changed, his teams changed what they did. So these are the 5 conversations that I think you need to have. These are good starting 5 conversations if you're gonna have them as teams. Constructive conflict, giving feedback while maintaining the relationship, possibilities thinking, how to build ideas with others, active listening, listening for understanding, design critique, how to provide constructive criticism to go from good to great, and implicit trust, communicating confidential information without risk. So, again, these are based on really high moral principles. Better together, ideation, active listening, going from good to great, and building a trusting environment. Those are all things we'd love to have in our environments and our teams. And I identified that that's what I wanted my team to do, so I made it very obvious, just like Dean Smith. So, constructive conflict. I started this one. Providing feedback while maintaining a relationship. My signpost is, I would come into you could do it to me. I've always get this thing like, oh, did you just do it to people? No, they did it to me. Once everybody learned the language, remember, the catchphrase was, the trigger phrase was, I need to step in the tension with you. The conversation was you would listen for understanding, then you would, after you listened for understanding, you try to come to mutual resolution. If we couldn't come to mutual resolution, we'd agree to separate using the trigger phrase, what? Thank you for the feedback. So a lady joins my group, Suzanne, she joins my group. And by the way, you have to agree on this, so I taught her. So when you were interviewed in my group, you would be, when I interviewed you, the last part of the interview was, I have these 5 conversations. This is how I'm going to act. Do you understand how I'm going to act? First day on the job, I set my first hour in the day job. We come work with me. These are the 5 conversations. This is how I'm going to act. This is how I'm going to act. Okay, so Suzanne comes in and she's working with me. It's in the first week, and there was a little bit of gap of communication. It's not horrible. It's not like this is like terrible. There's a little bit of gap of communication with senior management about what the purpose of this project was. We need to onboard this person. I ran on this person in the elevator. We need to close the gap. Not disastrous, but if you're a high performer, you don't want to go like, oh, Suzanne, you forgot to talk to these people. Fix that. No, I just said, Suzanne, I need to step in the tension with you. I described the situation. Jeff needs more information from us. He's not on board. I ran into the elevator. Suzanne asked clarifying questions, went away. She came back. She said, Steve, thank you very much. We agreed on a plan of how to go forward. She went and executed the plan, went and got it closed, went and sent the email, get it, whatever. She comes back at the end of the day. And she says, Steve, I'm so sorry about that this happened. It won't happen again. And I said, stop. Did I not act the way I said I was going to act? Did I not tell you there would be no repercussions for this? Now I am upset. You're wasting my time. She was apologizing, trying to make up for a relationship that was going to be undamaged because I acted just the way I said I was going to act. That's a kind of interesting story. The interesting story, the punchline to that story is that after Suzanne worked with us for about 3 months, she came back and she told me, and she gave me the most gratifying feedback I've ever gotten. She said, Steve, this group makes decisions in 30 minutes that in other groups took 30 days. She said, this group makes decisions in 30 minutes that my other group took 30 days to make. And it was all because it was very explicit and there's no repercussions, and that's the way we acted. So could I have told Suzanne take risk? Could I have told Suzanne to take responsibility? No. I just said, I got a conversation, it's called step in the tension, and I'm going to do with it. By actually doing that, I got all the moralistic things that I'd like to have happen. Another conversation people like to have is Irish ran an innovation group. This may be or may not be interesting to you. I needed people to build possibilities. I needed them to make new things, listen to ideas, build things, do the creative problem solving, make stuff. So they needed to create possibilities without prematurely critiquing them. So here was the question. We had this process, and so anybody at any time could walk into anybody else's office and say, I need to make a list. And the expected behavior was you would stop doing whatever you were doing and make a list of 10 ways to solve whatever problem this person presented without critique. Why 10? Because it was 2 hands. Sometimes the rules are arbitrary, but directionally is more than 2. So you'd make a list of 10 things, and then after you get the 10 things, you'd come to conclusion, pick the one you say. So you got it? And now, by the way, the only acceptable excuse not to say, was somebody, I walked into your office and said, make a list. The only acceptable excuse not to make a list was you had to be someone else instantaneously. It couldn't be I was busy on my project. It couldn't be, it would just, you would stop everything and help person make the list. So the story on this one, you asked Ken. This is a Ken. Ken worked with me in the I Squad. So I had this huge problem. I had to get, not huge, everything's huge, but I had to drop a $70,000 contract at 5 o'clock, and I was did not like the contract at 4:30. So I walked into Ken's office and I said, I don't like this contract. It's not right. I need to move forward. So I'm really tense. So I said, Ken, make a list with me of how I can prove this. So I explained the problem with the contract, and he went, okay. So he said, you could do this. And I said, Ken, I thought of that. Then he said, you could do this. Oh, Ken, that wouldn't really solve the issue. He said, you could do this. Then Ken turned to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, Steve, I thought we were making a blank list. You were supposed to listen without critique till we got to 10. What don't you understand about making a list? And it's like, oh no. Under the pressure, I had forgotten how to ideate. And the person I was working with called me out on space, and I apologetically, we started over, and within 5 minutes, he gave me the solution to solving this contract, right? And it actually was suggestion number 8. So I needed to have really good. I actually teach a course on this. It's called it's active listening, but is mindful inquiry, and it's a 4-stage process. But I'm just going to tell you one. This group that I was working with strategically had to give ideas space to grow. They had to give space to grow. Ideas are like babies, and they need to give space for ideas to grow because they're supposed to invent new things. So the point was they were taught just a 3-word phrase called tell me more. You came in and presented me an idea. I would say, tell me more about blah, blah, blah. Tell me more about blah, blah, blah. Now, it's very ritualistic. And you had to say, tell me more 6 times. I like that 3 times. And then have you thought of once? Because you always had to earn the right to critique an idea. Now you say, that's... So, one of the organizations I had to work with was the purchasing organization for General Mills. 200 people. They came in and said, these are the people that are buying stuff. So they were sent to every course on negotiation. So really good negotiation. Have you ever seen those in airplane magazines? How to negotiate? These were the superstars of negotiation. And they said, Steve, we don't have many ideas. Well, I think I know why. You don't know how to listen to ideas. So I took the 200 people, maybe 200 people, took them through that simple exercise about how to have an active listening conversation. Tell me more. Made them practice saying, tell me more 6 times. I like that 3 times. And then magical things happened because they now had. So I went up about a month later and I said, how did this go? And they said, tell me. So they said, we're telling more, tell me more. And I said, tell me about it. And they said, Sally just next door to me came in and I told her an idea. She said, tell me more. We all broke out into laughter. And I said, looked at her and I said, oh my gosh, you're trying to actively listen to me. Isn't that so funny? And the answer was, wow. They were actually actively listening. And so many of the senior managers of that organization just have tell me more on a placard pasted on their wall, and they say it's the best, that sounds too bright. They say it helped them greatly with all their communication, just by memorizing 3 words. So, let's see, another one. Design critique. These are designers providing unfiltered feedback that takes work from good to great. So in my little group of the I Squad, our final product was usually a presentation that encompassed what the strategy was. That strategy had to be well thought out, and that presentation had to be flawless. Because our working competition were huge research agencies out of New York. And by the way, they present very nicely. They got cool slides and they talk. So one of the established techniques that we used was design critique, which simply said that before any piece of work could leave our offices, it had to be shown to the entire group and that entire group would provide unfiltered direct feedback because we were going to take something from good to world class. So, little story, we had design critique, and I would start out, and the catchphrase was, in Spherical Oracle's transparency, we're doing design critique. You know what my little group would do to me when I said that? They would break out in laughter. Oh, Steve's going to be mean today. And the answer was, yes, Steve was going to be mean. He was going to critique the way you stood. He's going to critique the phrasing. He's going to critique the stories. He's going to critique everything. Now, the contract with this conversation was, you presented it. My spirit was only to take you from good to great. I wanted you to be flawless. So, we did a good to great conversation, a design critique conversation, showed the work, and we had somebody from outside the group join our group because they were part of this project. And we did a design critique session. They came in, and my presentation was 1 hour. After 3 hours of critique, I finally said, thank you for the feedback. I've gotten enough feedback. So the person that was outsider to the group was driving back, and by the way, my boss was in the conversation as well. Everybody presided unfiltered conversation, unfiltered feedback to go from good to great. My boss was right back in the car, back up the hill, back to her office, and the person that was not part of the group turned to her and she says, "Oh my gosh, do we need to call Steve? They were really mean to him for 3 hours." And my boss, since she was assigned and knew what design critique was about, she said, "Well, why would we call him to apologize? We did exactly what he wanted us to do." And the conversation was set up that it was going to be this unfiltered feedback, and then once it was to an outsider without that didn't understand the stop means stop so you don't get smushed, they couldn't interpret the conversation. The next one is implicit trust. Communicating with the faith that it will be kept confidential. Communicating with the faith that it'll be confidential. So one of the things I had to do in my little group is we had very many levels in this organization that I ran, and we worked with fairly senior people. And so I needed to tell them things that they never been told before. Like, really, what's going on here? And I had to explain this. So when you first started with the group, I said, okay, we're going to have implicit conversations about trust. I'm going to tell you more than anybody else has ever been told. And whenever I invoke the phrase, "we're in the tent now," I don't want you to say it to another person about what we just talked about. And let me explain the contract that I've just made with you. I will tell you more than you've ever been told before. If you decide to break that contract, you're just not breaking that contract between yourself and myself. You're breaking this contract for everybody else in the organization, our group, because I cannot give this unleveled trust to everybody, to 4 people, not to everybody. So you're ruling it for everybody in this group. I told these people in 10 years all sorts of things. Never once was my trust violated. Why? Because I told them what the contract was, and 2, they knew exactly when I really said something was off limits. We're in the tent now. So, now, let me pull up. So now this has just been hearsay. I've just told you stories. The stories are the way to learn. But I'd like to close the loop a little bit here, is just say, this is grounded in deep science, okay? But I used to be a statistician, so I used to study mathematics. In general, there's 2 types of systems in the world. There's complex systems and complicated systems. Complicated systems are like a blueprint. They're like a 747. You take the pieces apart, you can put it back together, and you will make a plane. Pieces of parts and blueprints. There's other types of systems in the world that are called complex systems that are created by understanding a few underlying rules. Does this spider have a blueprint for how to make a spider web?
In its brain.
What?
Based on the mathematics, I'm sure.
He has just something, very simple rules, connect things, don't make the strands too long. Something, now I'm going to step out. In biology, there's osmosis, right? Cells have, basically a lot of osmosis and a lot of things in cells are just governed by a simple rule. There's all sorts of mechanics that we need to understand, but make the inside like the outside. They actually tried to study birds swarming. You've seen the swarms of the birds, and they tried to do that mathematically. They could never model that, ever.
John Nash.
What?
John Nash.
Yeah, then they figured out that the birds, the swarming behavior of birds was understood by a few very simple rules. Stay behind the bird in front of you, try to follow it, don't run into it. You put that little simple model in and you get fantastic models of birds swarming. All human interactions are complex systems that are governed by very simple rules. So what does signpost language build on? Signpost language is built on the very simple principle, make the rules of our interactions explicit by using a signpost language trigger phrase, training people what the conversations are, and then the behavior that you want. Did our little group collaborate? Yes. Did they have trust? Yes. Did they did all the things that I wanted them to, they acted the way we should act. So, I would like you to take 3 minutes and think about this. And I actually put together a few sheets, and I will So, in your environment or wherever you are, and please take a piece of, think about a behavior you want to implement within your little working group. Describe what you want more of. You want more collaboration, you want more trust, you want more things, and why you want it. So think about what you want and why you want it, okay? Then brainstorm a trigger phrase. You understand what the task is? Think about something you want to have happen in your group. Give it a name. I want them to be more collaborative. I want them to be more trusting. I want them to build ideas better. And I actually, these are, if you want to make decisions more effectively, do you want to have relationship building? Do you have personal conflicts in your group? Do you want to collaborate better? Do you want to separate public time and private time more effectively? These are just things I thought of. Do you want to separate in a work-life balance and personal time for managing deadlines? Think of something you would like to have happen. All right. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I'm just going to sit here and be quiet. Think about it, and then I'm going to ask, and hopefully somebody can share. If they can't share, then I'll adapt.
Not a group activity.
That's individual. 1 minute. Those that have the sheet can take it away. Okay, that was 3 minutes. It was a really quick exercise. Did anybody have a conversation and did anybody come up with the trigger phrase? Too quick? Probably. But I'll give myself the feedback on that. It's a little too short. You at least have the sheet and you can start to think about it in your breaks. I'll give you one. Then I went and worked with a innovation firm, and they were highly feeling organization. Relationships were hypersensitive. They were a hypersensitive organization, and so there are miscommunications because things were being communicated, over interpreted. I noticed you were sitting with your arms crossed. Oh my gosh, you don't like me anymore. So they were over interpreting their environment. They developed a trigger phrase. You know what? I might be having a paranoid delusion. Can I check it out with you now? That's what they said. So, and they did it right in front of me after they invented the trigger phrase. I think I might be having a paranoid delusion right now, but I think that you're very upset with me because I suggested we do A rather than B. No. Why would you say that? Well, when I talked about it, you stood like this and you were frowning. Oh, I was thinking about my kids and how they didn't do the dishes last night. Oh, okay, thank you. They were over-interpreting things. I've actually had people say that they use these with their teenagers. When they have to have bedtimes and stuff, they develop very concrete language about how to do this. Actually, I had somebody tell me they do it couples therapy, where they said, "Honey, we need open ears now." When they didn't think they were being heard, and whenever they turned to their partner and said, "Honey, I think we need open ears now," the other person was obligated to stop talking and listen with open ears. So, here's the punch. Here's the punchline. Signpost language: identify the change you want, identify the trigger phrase, teach others what it means, and act appropriately. Don't break the trust when you actually set it up. Next one is, this is probably the money slide. I sincerely believe that most people have good intentions. I sincerely believe that. Most of you have good intentions. Most of you want to listen to people. Most of you want to make others better. Most of you want to collaborate. Most of you want to share. But there's really a radical difference between good intentions and being intentional. They're not the same concept. And we operate with the mistaken belief sometimes that if we have good intentions, that people will see them. All I'm saying is take your good intentions and hook them up with intentional stuff. So that's it. I think my timekeeper is pointing to me. That's me. And if you need, like I said, this is stuff I love to do, and I love to talk to people about it. Any thoughts, questions, desires? Yes, back there.
I thought of one for the slide that we had exercise on, for all of those nerds that are kind of shy and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, they want to be more social, but they don't know how to approach it. You could accept them, like invite them out to lunch with you,
Mm-hmm.
or even invite them to a meetup about the technology you're passionate about, and they might just come along.
So what's your trigger phrase?
I thought, let's hang out at blank meetup, or hang out at the after party.
Let's hang out.
Yeah.
So if you're a nerd and you don't like, I'm sorry, didn't you say? If you don't have restrictions and you need to work with other people and you're struggling to make communications because you're shy,
Your coworker would that.
just say, let's hang out. Oh, you want to talk and be social for a bit? Okay. This is a time to talk about kids. Great. Let's talk about our vacations. Great. Cool. Yes, back there.
I've got a second one is either you could say if you're developing software and you're kind of like really in the zone and QA comes by or you're some project manager, somebody comes by and really wants to talk to you a lot and you say, oh, I need to finish this. You could say, I've got an egg boiling right now, or I've got an egg trying to run.
Fantastic. Do you get this? You're at this hacking, doing stuff, you're in the zone, and you just turn to, I got an egg boiling right now. Thank you. And I step away, and I come back, and he tells me when the egg, I might ask him, when's the egg going to be done? 3 hours. Great. I'll see you in 3 hours. But
That one extends it to other groups, right? How successful you're extending this kind of practice out to other groups. That phrase kind of comes with some meaning baked into it. Stepping into the tension, I've got to learn from what the bow is and what that means to make it It's tightly
You know,
knit.
it's interesting. The best trigger phrases always have a story, and that's why you brainstorm a bunch of trigger phrases. It works best. This signpost language doesn't pay for itself if it's a one-off conversation. It can't. You don't have repetitive. You're not going to train them how. But if you have routine conversations, and so I gave you an example of a whole group that was taught one trigger phrase, tell me more, for hundreds of people. That would work. If this this work zone balance is a big thing for a tech company, as I imagine it is, you could teach a lot of people at a company at one of your meetings. Say that's what it means. Good. Other questions?
Yeah, how do you avoid it appearing condescending? I think some people, like that one example you gave, honey, we need to open our ears. I think that could be really.
Well, that was a personal conversation, so it's condescending in their own environment. There's a couple things. I'll step into the tension on that one. It is simply that there's a couple things. One, as a leader, you have to remember that others don't have that conversation all the time with you. So, first thing I would say is that as a leader, I might have to step into tension with somebody once every 2 weeks. So I can't change up the language. It's got to be the same. And two, I have actually found that routinizing the language actually is appreciated rather than viewed as being derogatory. Now, it's not like we said this, like, would I evoke one of these phrases every 15 minutes? No, maybe 4 times a day. But when I, go ahead.
I found a way that's helped with that. And it's
Good.
started out by saying, I'm for you. Like, I'm on your team. And then starting, I feel like, at least for me, the biggest thing is if someone were to say that, whether or not I thought they believed in me would make a big difference.
Cool. You know, and the other thing I would tell you, if you have really broken group dynamics where people don't really like each other, this is not going to fix it. This is about going from good to great. If you guys don't like each other and you're at tension and you really dislike each other at a visceral level, this language isn't going to fix that. I'm assuming there's a base level of understanding that we want to be a team. If you don't have the base level understanding that you want to be a team, this will not work. But if you have a base level study that you're a team and you'd like to be better, this works. Thank you for your time. It's up. Have a great lunch, and I'll hang out here just for a bit.